February 19th, 1945, off the black sand beaches of Iwo Jima. Dawn hasn't broken yet, but the Pacific is already trembling under the thunder of battleships. A salty mist rolls across the decks of the transport ships as Marines adjust their gear, their breath tight with anticipation. And below them, hidden beneath canvas covers, sit the machines the Japanese commanders believe are a bad joke, the amphibious variants of the M4 Sherman. In the dim blue dark, Lieutenant Harris McLean of the 4th Marine Division runs a gloved hand along the side of his tank. Steel cold, the smell of diesel heavy. His men sit atop the turret, silent, listening to the distant rumble of naval guns pulverizing Iwo's volcanic ridges. McLean's eyes drift toward the faint outline of the island, a fortress of tunnels, bunkers carved deep into rock. And somewhere in that labyrinth sits Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the Japanese commander who has already dismissed these swimming Shermans as foolish toys that will sink long before reaching shore. But the Marines know what waits beneath those waves. Currents strong enough to drag landing craft off course, sand too soft to anchor amphibious vehicles, and Japanese artillery zeroed in to turn the beach into a slaughterhouse. McLean feels the deck shudder beneath his boots. Another barrage, another signal that the clock is closing in. A voice cracks through the loudspeaker. Tank crews, stand by. Launch on command. Below deck, engines growl awake. The entire ship vibrates as the first Sherman rolls into position, bow pointed toward the water. Japanese scouts on the island have been watching for days. They saw the tanks loaded. They heard intelligence reports, and on their diaries, and even in some command briefings, they wrote the same conclusion. These American tanks will never make the swim. They will be destroyed before they matter. On Iwo Jima's cliffs, Sergeant Major Horiuchi peers through binoculars, smirking as the silhouettes of U.S. vehicles line up on the transports. To him, these floating machines are nothing but oversized steel coffins. The volcanic sand will bog them, mortar fire will finish them, and the Americans will learn once again that Japanese defenses are unbreakable. But he doesn't know what is about to rise from the surf. A whistle blasts across the transport's deck. Launch! The first amphibious Sherman lurches forward, rattling metal, then crashes into the waves. For a moment, it disappears beneath the foam, then resurfaces, engine roaring, tracks churning water like a living creature forcing its way to hell. McLean watches it stabilize, then slams his fist lightly against his turret. All right, boys, time to prove a few people wrong. The sky begins to brighten, the enemy guns awaken, and the mockery that Japanese commanders voiced for months is about to collide with reality. Steel, fire, and determination carving a path toward the deadliest landing of the Pacific War. McLean watches the first Sherman steady itself on the water as dawn bleeds red over Iwo. The island's jagged silhouette grows clearer, its volcanic slopes scarred by the opening naval bombardment. But now, the Japanese guns begin to answer. A shell screams overhead and explodes closer than any Marine wants to hear. Water erupts into a towering column. The amphibious Shermans rock violently, their flotation screens flexing but holding. Inside one tank, Corporal Lewis curses as seawater splashes through a hatch seam, cold enough to burn. "Hold her steady," McLean shouts to his driver, Corporal Jensen, as their own tank rolls down the ramp. Gravity takes over. For 2 seconds, they freefall. Then, impact. A crushing slam as hundreds of pounds of steel hit the Pacific. The tank plunges beneath the churning surface. Darkness, pressure, a groaning protest of metal. Then the vehicle surges upward, bursts into open air, and settles into its swim mode. The Marine tank column forms up, one by one, like steel beasts forcing their way toward a shore the Japanese believe cannot be taken. On the island, Sergeant Major Horiuchi lowers his binoculars. "What are they doing?" a young artilleryman asks. Horiuchi snorts, "Dying. They just don't know it yet." He gives the fire order. Japanese coastal guns open up with frightening precision. Artillery stitched with machine gun fire turns the incoming landing craft into fireballs. But the amphibious Shermans, lower in the water, harder to hit, and armored, push forward through geysers of seawater and smoke. Inside McClane's tank, the world is noise and vibration. Depth charges go off dangerously close, rocking the vehicle hard enough to rattle teeth. The crew clings to their positions, breathing through the diesel heat and metal stench. "Range to shore," McClane shouts. 600 yards, Lewis replies. "Keep moving. We stop, we die." A nearby LVT explodes, spraying burning fuel across the waves. The crew inside screams as the craft sinks. McClane forces himself not to look. There's no room for mercy here, only momentum. As they approach the surf zone, Japanese mortar fire intensifies. Shells rake to beach in timed patterns, calculating where the tanks will land. Yet the Shermans keep advancing. The first tank's tracks finally bite into volcanic sand. Its engine roars as it claws forward. Another follows, and another. The Japanese defenders, expecting sinking wrecks, instead see armored silhouettes crawling onto the shore, shedding seawater as they rise like steel phantoms. The amphibious Shermans have made it to Iwo Jima. Horiyuchi's confident smirk fades. This is not possible, but it is. And worse, those tanks are armed, ready, and about to change the fate of the Marines struggling under a storm of machine gun nests and hidden bunkers. As McClane's vehicle thunders up the beach, he calls into the radio. "All units, form line, support the infantry. Let's get our boys off this damn shoreline." For the first time that morning, amid chaos and death, U.S. Marines see something they desperately need, a fighting chance. The Marines find their fighting chance, but the island is not ready to give up anything easily. Iwo Jima is a fortress carved from volcanic rock, its tunnels, pillboxes, and hidden firing ports designed for one purpose, to grind attackers into dust. As McClane's Sherman clears the surf, the crew confronts the hell waiting beyond the shoreline. Every direction erupts with gunfire. Tracers carve red-hot lines across the smoky air. Mortar shells burst overhead, raining shrapnel that rings against the tank's turret like hail on steel. "Target's front!" Sergeant Lewis yells as he swings the .30 cal turret. "I see them," McClane responds. "Driver, angle left. Give me a line on that bunker." Jensen guns the engine. The treads churn black sand. Thick, gritty, and treacherous, the tank struggles for traction, lurching forward in heavy, grinding motions. All around them, Marines lie pinned down behind barely there ridges of ash. Every time a squad tries to advance, machine gun fire forces them flat again. That is why the Shermans are here. Lewis opens fire first. His turret gun chatters, stitching the face of a concealed pillbox. The Japanese gunners inside duck, but continue firing, bullets ricocheting harmlessly off the Sherman's armor as the tank closes distance. "Main gun ready," calls the loader, Private Harlan, sweat dripping down his face despite the claustrophobic chill of the armored interior. "Fire," McClane orders. The cannon roars. The tank rocks backward. A shockwave ripples through the sand. The pillbox shatters in a burst of flame and pulverized concrete. Marines nearby cheer and finally advanced past the killing zone that had trapped them for nearly half an hour. Another artillery round screams past, exploding so close that the blast slams the side of McClane's tank. The metal groans. A wrench clatters off a shelf. For a moment, Jensen wrestles the controls to keep the vehicle from pitching sideways. "Status?" McClane demands. "We're good," Jensen grunts. "Tracks intact, engine steady. Let's keep punching." Not far away, another amphibious Sherman isn't as lucky. A carefully hidden Japanese anti-tank gun fires a high-velocity shell that tears straight through its side armor. The explosion is catastrophic, fire spilling from every hatch. The tank's turret slumps, its crew trapped inside. McClane sees the blast through a periscope. His jaw tightens, but he doesn't allow grief to distract him. "Target that gun emplacement," he growls. Lewis identifies the source, and Harlan loads another shell. Seconds later, the Sherman returns fire, obliterating the enemy position before it can claim another tank. The climb inland begins. Slow, brutal, and uphill. The volcanic slope forces the tank to grind forward at a crawl. Beneath the treads, the black sand shifts like liquid, offering no solid purchase. "Feels like driving on wet coal," Jensen mutters. Above them, Mount Suribachi looms, its summit veiled in smoke.
Japanese observers call out positions, directing artillery with uncanny accuracy. Every few minutes, another shell plunges into the beachhead, throwing Marines into the air like rag dolls. Yet the Shermans continue pushing. Their 75mm guns blast open trenches where hidden machine gun teams fire down on the infantry. Their armor absorbs hits that would tear a man apart. Every yard gained by a tank becomes a lifeline for dozens of Marines who were moments away from being cut down. Inside the Japanese tunnel system, Sergeant Major Horiyuchi receives frantic updates. The tanks have breached Sector Red. They're advancing along the right flank. Our machine guns cannot stop them. Horiyuchi slams his fist on the map table. They were never supposed to make it ashore, but they did. And now Iwo Jima's defenders are learning a harsh truth. The amphibious tanks they mocked are carving a path straight through positions once deemed impregnable. The battlefield shifts. The Japanese lines bend. The Marines follow behind the Shermans like a rising tide. McLean's tank advances another dozen yards when the radio crackles with a chilling warning. Anti-tank traps ahead. Mines confirmed. Watch your movement. The worst is yet to come. McLean steadies himself, fingertips brushing the metal edge of the periscope. Ahead, the battlefield tightens into a maze of volcanic ridges, terraces, and shadowed cuts carved by centuries of eruptions, terrain perfectly suited for ambushes and death traps. Iwo Jima is not just defended, it is engineered to kill. Driver, slow to 1/4, McLean orders. We're entering the mine zone. Jensen eases the Sherman forward. The tank crawls, its treads pressing cautiously across the black sand. Every creak of the suspension echoes through the hall. Every vibration feels like it could be the last. Outside, Marines signal warnings with frantic arm gestures. Tank traps ahead. Mines, lots of them. Snipers on the ridge. McLean swivels the periscope toward a jagged outcrop. A faint muzzle flash blinks from a crack in the rocks. Lewis, 1 o'clock high. Lewis responds instantly. The .30 cal rattles, sending white-hot tracers stitching across the ridge. The sniper vanishes behind rock, but the tank has bought the infantry another few precious seconds. The column of Shermans advances in staggered formation. Some hug the natural embankments, others widen their spacing to avoid clustered detonations. Each tank commander knows what's at stake. If even one hits a mine, the entire assault in that sector could stall, leaving exposed Marines to face interlocking machine gun fire alone. 30 yards ahead, a sudden plume of sand erupts beneath the lead Sherman. A deafening blast follows. The tank heaves upward, one tread torn loose, the hull buckling from the eruption of buried explosives. The vehicle crumples into the sand, smoke rolling from its underside as flames lick up through the engine deck. Jesus, Harlan whispers, staring at the silhouette of the crippled tank through the loader's hatch. Keep moving, McLean orders, voice low but firm. We can't stop now. He knows the crew of the destroyed tank has seconds, maybe even less, to escape before secondary explosions ignite. Marines rush forward under fire, dragging the injured clear as Japanese gunners open up from newly revealed slits in the terrain. Targets emerging from the left trench, Lewis shouts. Loader, HE, loaded, fire! The 75mm gun thunders. The shell arcs into the shallow trench, detonating with a flash that sends rock fragments spraying in every direction. A second round follows, then a third, collapsing the trench entirely. But the Japanese counterattacks are relentless. From an unseen tunnel entrance, an infantry squad sprints forward carrying satchel charges, decided weapons designed specifically for tanks. Marines yell warnings. Tank hunters, 10 o'clock, moving fast! Jensen, rotate left! McLean.
The Shermans advance slowly, black sand grinding beneath their treads as they push deeper into the island's volcanic interior. The air is thick with smoke, white, gray, and oily black, drifting like low clouds across the battlefield. Every gust of wind carries the scent of burning fuel, cordite, and the bitter tang of sulfur venting from cracks in the ground. McLean scans ahead. There it is, the strong point that intelligence officers warned them about, a multi-layered fortification carved directly into the hardened lava rock, its entrance barely visible behind natural folds of terrain. Above it, terraces of interlocked defensive pits cover the slopes like scales on a dragon's back. Tanaka and his staff thought this place was untouchable, McLean mutters to himself. Let's prove them wrong. Marines hug the ground behind ridges of sand as Japanese machine guns open fire again. Tight, disciplined bursts from expertly hidden positions. Tracers snap across the air, ricocheting off the Sherman's frontal armor with sharp metallic whines. The tanks press forward. Lewis, sweep those terraces. Start from the top, McLean commands. Lewis elevates the .30 cal and rakes the hillside, forcing the gunners to duck back into their concealed pits. Harlan swings the turret, waiting for the next target call. A mortar round lands 10 yards away, showering the Sherman with sand and fragments. Driver, keep steady. We're almost in range. The strong point begins to wake alive. Rifle fire, grenades, mortar pops, all erupting at once, as if the entire hillside is breathing fire. Then comes the unmistakable sound. A Type 97 anti-tank gun, fired from a camouflaged bunker on the right flank. The shell slams into the Sherman's glasses plate with a brutal clang that reverberates through every rib in McLean's body. Hit! Front armor, no penetration, Harlan reports. Find that gun, put it out, permanently. The tank halts, trading safety for accuracy. Harlan rotates the turret in sharp increments. Smoke swirls, thinning just enough to reveal the outline of the bunker. Dark stone rim, sandbags, and the long barrel protruding like a spear. On target, Harlan says. Loader, AP. AP loaded. Fire. The 75mm round crashes into the bunker mouth. The entire opening erupts in flame and dust. A second shell follows, collapsing the roof inward and silencing the anti-tank gun for good. With the flank now clear, the Marines surge forward, shouting for covering fire. They advance in bounding leaps, using the Shermans as mobile shields. But the Japanese defenders are not done. From within the main strongpoint, a blast door grinds open. Two soldiers sprint out hauling a rocket launcher, the Type 4 AT rocket, Japan's answer to the bazooka. Rocketeer at 11 o'clock, Lewis yells. Take them, McLean snaps. Lewis fires, shredding the first soldier. The second kneels, steadying the launcher. Driver, ram him! Jensen slams the throttle forward. The Sherman lunges, kicking sand like a wave. The Japanese soldier releases the trigger just as the tank smashes through him, the unfired rocket skittering harmlessly across the sand. The strong point now looms directly ahead, its dark interior flickering with gun flashes. McLean's voice hardens. Harlan, HE, full charge. We're breaching that entrance. Loaded. Fire. The explosion collapses the entrance facade, sending rocks tumbling into the tunnel. Marines cheer as the hillside trembles, dust billowing outward like a volcanic eruption. But even as the fortress begins to crumble, McLean sees movement deeper inside. A secondary chamber, further back, still intact. This strong point isn't a bunker. It's a network, a labyrinth, and they're only at the threshold. McLean grips the periscope. All right, boys, looks like we're going deeper. The battle for Iwo Jima's heart is far from over. Dust continues to fall from the shattered rock face as McLean steadies himself over the periscope. The collapsed entrance smolders, smoke curling like ghostly fingers from the fresh cracks. Yet beneath the debris, deeper shadows pulse with movement, proof that the Japanese strongpoint is far from neutralized. The order comes fast. Infantry wants us to push forward another 10 yards, Lewis calls out. They're preparing to breach the interior tunnels. McLean nods. Tell them we'll clear the mouth first. No surprises. The Sherman edges ahead, treads grinding molten black sand in chunks of volcanic stone into a gritty slurry. The closer they move, the more the air changes, heavy, humid, tinged with sulfur venting through the fractured earth. Even inside the tank's cramped, metallic womb, the crew can feel the island breathing around them. Then movement. A burst of muzzle flashes deeper inside the collapsed entrance. The Japanese defenders have reformed behind the little barrier, firing through narrow slits carved into the tunnel walls. Their rounds spark against the Sherman's battle, reflecting the bright flash of the moon. But not, McLean snaps. Harlan, put HE directly into those firing units. The 75mm tank roars again, sending shockwaves through the tank. Glass slams into the inner wall, causing sections of the volcanic stone to shear up. Screams echo from inside. The
defenders surge from the newly exposed tunnel, grenades in hand. Desperate and fearless, a soldier breaks through the smoke, sprinting directly at the Sherman's left tread. Grenade runner, 9 o'clock, through the shots. Before the plane can respond, Marine fires point blank, rocking the attacker near 3 feet from the tank. Grenade detonates prematurely, blasting a shower of volcanic debris across the battlefield. Arden curses him with regret. The broader tunnel system. Marines follow closely, adjusting their formation as intense movement. Inside the tunnels, war flashes, rapid fire, grenades, unmistakable rumble of something metallic in a red position. Sounds like the breathing of another anti-tank gun inside the tunnel. In the tunnel? They'll cover themselves alive firing that thing. Doesn't matter. There's a point blank, we're done. Firing into that tunnel with geyser of flame, dust, and mangled metal erupting from the tunnel mouth. The shockwave rolls outward, rattling the Sherman like a toy. Silence follows. Not peace, never that on Iwo Jima, but silence. A momentary vacuum in which even the Marines pause, scanning for the next threat. Gradually, the smoke thins enough to reveal the interior, a collapsed section, molten edges still glowing where the blast flash fused the volcanic rock. The strong point, this layer of it at least, has fallen. McLean leans back, drenched in sweat. One position down, he murmurs. Dozens more to go. He doesn't need to say the rest. A tank crew inside a volcanic fortress. A Marine battalion fighting an enemy who refuses to surrender. A battle where every inch of ground is paid in blood. Iwo Jima has only begun. The blast still echoes through the volcanic chamber when Lewis lowers his headset, listening to the infantry channel crackle with new orders. Outside, Marines advance past the Sherman, stepping carefully over the fractured stone and the bodies half buried in ash. The mountain exhales a slow, sulfurous breath, as if irritated by the violence tearing through its veins. Command says this sector connects to a larger tunnel hub, Lewis reports. If we push another 50 yards, we can cut the whole network in half. McLean wipes soot from his brow. And that's where we go. Jensen eases forward, slow and deliberate. The tank lurches ahead, its treads grinding over terrain that no longer resembles a battlefield so much as the inside of a collapsed furnace. Heat radiates from the exposed fissures. Thin streams of steam hiss upward, turning the air into a shimmering haze. As they reach the far side of the shattered strongpoint, the ground changes again, flattening into a broad, blackened terrace. Directly ahead, a massive tunnel mouth yawns open, reinforced with steel beams and concrete poured directly into volcanic stone. It is not a bunker. It is an entrance to an underground city. Lewis exhales sharply. That is no field position. No, McLean agrees. That's infrastructure. Marines gather near the tank, their sergeant pointing with his carbine. Sherman crew, we need you to suppress the entrance while demolition teams get close. Japanese troops have firing lanes all along the interior. McLean nods, turning to his gunner. Harlan, start probing their defenses. Light AP. We want to see how deep the structure goes. Aye. He fires. The shell slams into the tunnel wall, sparks bursting from the reinforced concrete. A moment later, return fire erupts from inside. Machine guns stitched into overlapping fields, firing in slow, disciplined bursts to conserve ammunition. Jensen instinctively hunkers down even further in the driver's seat. They've got enough guns in there to hold off a regiment. Not if we collapse the mouth, McLean says. Another burst of fire strikes the Sherman's glasses. Rounds ricochet upward, pinging off armor like angry hornets. One Marine is hit in the shoulder, spinning into the dirt as corpsmen rush forward. The Japanese follow up with grenades, rolled expertly down the sloping stone floor of the tunnel. Two detonate short, one bounces further, erupting near a cluster of Marines and sending volcanic shards through the air. Push us up, McLean orders. We're taking their angle away. The Sherman.
February 28, 1945, western slopes of Iwo Jima. The smoke had thinned, but the stench of sulfur, cordite, and scorched earth clung stubbornly to the air. Amphibious Shermans, those that still ran, idled in a staggered perimeter, while recovery crews hauled disabled vehicles out of collapsed trenches. Their once smooth hulls were pitted with shrapnel scars, streaked with dried seawater, and blackened by near-continuous firefights. Yet they remained standing. Nearby, Lieutenant Colonel Burton Cates reviewed casualty reports beneath a torn shelter half, glancing repeatedly at the tank platoons that had made his regiment's breakthroughs possible. He knew the truth now. Without those amphibious vehicles absorbing fire, blasting through hidden fortifications, and carrying engineers directly to cave mouths, certain marine companies would have been annihilated on the beaches. Far below, Navy landing craft shuttled wounded men toward hospital ships, their wakes cutting clean lines across the gray-green sea. On shore, Japanese prisoners whispered in disbelief, still struggling to understand how the laughable American waterborne tanks had survived volcanic terrain their commanders had claimed would swallow them. For both sides, the battle had rewritten doctrine. Planners in Pearl Harbor would later cite Iwo Jima as irrefutable proof that armored support, adapted, amphibious, and relentless, was no longer auxiliary in Pacific warfare. It was essential. The island, once thought impregnable, had fallen because machines once mocked as absurd had become decisive instruments of momentum, pressure, and shock. March 3, 1945, the ridgeline above Katano Point. Dawn crept slowly across the battlefield, revealing a landscape carved into unnatural shapes by bombardment and tank fire. Marines moved quietly through the hardened lava fields, marking remaining cave systems and clearing debris. The rumble of engines echoed faintly as surviving amphibious Shermans repositioned to support mop-up operations, their silhouettes almost surreal against the jagged black terrain. Crewmen worked in exhausted silence, repacking ammunition, patching ruptured hoses, coaxing reluctant transmissions back to life. Every tank bore the signature of Iwo Jima carved into its armor, deep gouges from explosive charges, melted paint from black thrower backblast, and embedded fragments from point-blank ambushes. Captain Harold Spencer of Company B stood beside his Sherman, Sea Banshee, running a gloved hand across its battered flank. He remembered the ridicule these machines had received months earlier, how Japanese officers boasted that no tank could survive volcanic ground, how intelligence reports predicted they would sink in black sand or stall in sulfur pits. Instead, these amphibious vehicles had forced their way inland, adapting with each brutal hour. They had become breaching tools, mobile bunkers, and psychological weapons, grinding steadily through terrain and doctrine alike. Nearby, engineers documented the remains of Japanese blockhouses cracked open by tank guns. Analysts from the Fleet Marine Force gathered notes, tracing blast angles, turret arcs, and movement patterns. They knew these lessons would shape future landings. Armor could no longer be dismissed in Pacific assaults, not when a single-tracked machine could neutralize fortifications that cost hundreds of infantry casualties to capture. Across the ridge, a Marine raised the stars and stripes over a captured observation post. The breeze carried the sound down to the tank crews, who paused, watching the flags settle into position. For a moment, the battlefield grew still. The island had not yet been declared secured, but its fate was sealed. And woven into that fate, etched into the superheated stone, was the undeniable legacy of amphibious Shermans, once mocked as impractical toys. Their engines, still warm, told a different story, one of adaptation, resilience, and the quiet evolution of warfare under fire.